Welcome to A Little Too Quiet, the Ferndale Library podcast, brought to you by the Friends of the Ferndale Library. Today, we have an interview with an actor and a director and a playwright and a producer. It's Emilio Rodriguez, the co-founder of the Black and Brown Theater, based here in Detroit. This talented troupe of actors is going to be doing a virtual theater experience, a virtual program for the kids, the patrons here, who are participating in our summer reading program on August 1st. That's a Saturday at 2 p.m. And we were very excited to talk to Emilio. I was joined by Youth Services librarian Jasmine Parker, who herself has a background in theater. So we're very much looking forward to this. They're doing a show called Beast of the Town, and the registration link is going to be on our Facebook page. And if you also have any questions, of course, you can call the library. But we're excited to bring you this interview with Emilio Rodriguez. The Black and Brown Theater is a nonprofit theater company, and it's seeking to create opportunities for these artists of color so that they can have more opportunities in the professional Michigan theater scene, which you'll hear more about in this interview. Joining us now, Emilio Rodriguez, playwright, director, producer, actor of the Black and Brown Theater, and I think co-founder, correct, Emilio? Welcome to the podcast. Hello.
Thank you. Yes, that's correct. Co-founder.
Welcome to A Little Too Quiet. It's the Ferndale Library podcast. We're happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be on this.
Yeah, and joining me is Youth Services librarian Jasmine Parker.
Hello.
There is a program coming up. There's a virtual program coming up for kids, part of our summer reading program. And the Black and Brown Theater are going to be doing a Zoom performance. Is that right, Jasmine? What's the story?
Yes, so Black and Brown Theater is going to be presenting Beast of the Town, and they're going to be doing this August 1st, Saturday. And I'm just so excited about this because we know that princesses can be black and brown.
That's right, we do.
And it's just such a great opportunity to be able to support a fellow theater lover. So, yeah. Welcome, Emilio. Can you talk about when the idea for Black and Brown Theater was, and what was the inspiration, the primary inspiration for it?
Yes, a friend of mine and I co-founded it in 2016, and we had both had theater experiences outside of Michigan. I'm originally from California, and so we had both been exposed to it being normal to see a play with people of many different races on stage at the same time. That was not unfamiliar to us. And when we came to Michigan, we realized there was a lot of diversity within the state as a whole, but the diversity was very segregated into different areas. And then particularly in the theater as well, it was either an all white cast or an all black cast or an all Latino cast, but we weren't seeing as much integration, and we wanted to see more diversity, particularly with Black and Latino actors and playwrights and directors working together to create art that resonated with a variety of communities.
Okay, well, performing on stage theater, that is one thing, the artistic craft of acting. But saying you're gonna start something and make something out of nothing, that I always admire anyone who says that they have that and they get the motivation. So I wanted to ask how it got started and what some of the key factors were to get momentum for it.
Yeah, so we started just with a showcase. We had 6 local playwrights, and then we had 6 different casts, each doing a 10-minute play, a variety of themes. Variety was always our goal and sort of our inspiration and our theme statement. So we had some that were really dramatic pieces about really topical issues, some that were just lighthearted romance stories, some that were just funny pieces that the audience could get a nice laugh at. So that variety was something that was really important to us. And it started off as just a showcase. And then when we saw that people were really excited about it, theater companies were excited about it, actors were excited about it, audiences were excited about it, that's when we started to continue to expand into more of an actual company rather than just the showcases.
Excellent. And so keeping up with the demand, I know that you spoke about some companies being excited and interested in what you were offering. Can you also share some instances where you can recall that provided motivation for you to officially begin a company?
I think the audience is my biggest motivation because their reaction is what keeps us going. I mean, sometimes we're rehearsing for a really long time, or we're spending a lot of time doing promotion. We have no idea how many people are going to show up or who's going to show up. And so it's always, for me, when we get to do the piece and we get to see the audience and hear from the audience directly about how much the shows mean to them, how much they enjoy it, how they're looking forward to the next show. And that's sort of what keeps me going and keeps all of us going. And we sort of team huddle and say, okay, the audience really loved this. So even though we're all exhausted, we have to do another one soon.
That's validation that you're doing something very important.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about what the mission and the message of the Black and Brown Theater is and why it's important.
Yes. So we, our mission is that we are a 501c3 nonprofit theater company creating opportunities for theater artists of color and the communities they are part of. And we added that statement a little bit later. Originally it was just the theater artists of color, but we included the communities they are part of later because we realized how important it was to be working in a variety of communities, and then also that the actors and the talent that we are working with were coming from a variety of communities. So those communities that they're a part of are important as well. And communities can be defined in many different ways, whether it's race and ethnicity, whether it's orientation, whether it's the actual physical location, whether it's even some things as specific as having family connection. That's important to a lot of our actors and audiences as well. And so we want to continue to expand and showcase that variety that people of color can be seen in many different roles. We can tell stories that are really powerful and deep and make people uncomfortable. And we can also tell stories that make people smile and make people celebrate who they are and make people forget about some of the difficult challenges that are going on in the world. And I think both are valid and both are what we're trying to highlight.
And I couldn't agree with you more, especially about wanting to make people smile, because I remember when you shared with me the link for the Cinderella story time, I think it was so memorable because the actress was drop dead gorgeous, and a woman of color, but she was in her house like she was at a ball. I mean, it was so believable in her presence and just how she adjusted. It was just, for me, it was a very memorable moment. And I am 35 years young. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine if somebody who's 7 or even below that or older sees that, the representation, but just seeing something like that, it is quite memorable, especially during these times of COVID-19. Mm-hmm. But I digress. I wanted to know what have been some of the most memorable or inspiring experience so far.
I'm so glad that you touched on the princess moment, because I think a lot of the biggest and most memorable moments I have had have been with those princess performances that we've done. The one that Jasmine is particularly referencing was in response to COVID. So we had to switch some of our programming around, and we did some Facebook Live story time telling. And because that was pretty early on in COVID, we didn't have the same access to like costumes and whatnot. So she was literally in like a prom quinceañera type dress and a crown that we had from our other show. But as Jasmine mentioned, it was just that validation. And it also was in her home. So it kind of actually worked really well because it reminded people that everyone in their own homes and in their own community should be treated like royalty. So that was a really standout moment. But I think I have to choose 2 favorites, but they're both tied into the princess. One would be a really young audience member. I think she was like 3 when we performed in Ipsy, and she came in a green princess dress as well. And we were doing Frog Prince at that time. So Sasha was wearing a green princess dress, and she just like sat with Sasha as Sasha did like the meet and greet with all of the children. And that young girl just sat with Sasha the whole time. Like she was also Sasha's like co-princess, which was really adorable. And the fact that she felt that comfortable and that connected after just seeing a performance was really powerful. And I think the other thing that really stuck out to me was when we did the performance it was the same show, Frog Prince, but we did it at the Scarab Club, which is an art museum. And I was going up to some of the audience members in between the show or right before the show. And I went up to a woman who was standing and I said, "Oh, I can get a chair for you. And if you need chairs for your kids or they can sit on the pillows." And she was like, "Oh, I don't have any kids. I just came by myself." And I was like, "Oh, wow. Like, that's so cool." But it did remind me, like, we were so focused on children and families, but even people who don't have families, a lot of people like my generation, I don't know what generation you all fall in. You both look great.
We're elder millennials. Let's say that.
Okay. Yeah. I'm like, I think mid millennial. So I think our generation, then we all kind of grew up with maybe not as much diversity as there could have been. And so this was kind of like for her, the audience member that I saw, this was like her justice for her childhood of what she should have been able to see, and probably felt like a filling of the void. Because if you think about it, like Disney didn't even have Tiana until 2008. So a lot of us were like in college by that time. So that was like a really great reminder that the shows are not just for kids or just for families. They're for anyone who wants to connect with that magic of theater and storytelling and the magic of feeling like you're royalty.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that, Jasmine and I are the same age, and we grew up not seeing representation on our televisions or on our stages. And, I was saying right before we started recording that that's sort of what kind of strikes people so much about something like this is like a big cultural linchpin now, but like that's what everyone reacted to with something like Hamilton. They didn't see representation. And so if our generation, like Jasmine said earlier, she was blown away by that performance of Princess in her living room, and I would be too. But talk about how important it is, the work that Black and Brown Theater does, specifically with youth outreach. We have Gen Z and now younger that you get to engage with. Talk about how important that is and what that's like.
For me, it was really important, not only because both my parents were educators. My dad taught in high school, my mom taught preschool, but also I as well taught everything from preschool up until I now teach a college class. So I really believe in the value of education. But also people ask a lot of times, what was the play that inspired me to get into theater? And oftentimes people are surprised that the first play I saw wasn't until college.
Oh, wow.
We didn't have like plays coming to our school, and we didn't have a lot of like theater companies in the area that I grew up in. We would have to drive like an hour and a half in traffic to LA to go see a play. So that just wasn't a priority for my family. So I think it's really important to bring the plays to the schools. So that way you don't have to worry about if anyone has accessibility in getting to a theater, or even the cost of tickets, or even, performing at libraries or performing at museums. Any of the ways that we can get theater out to audiences so more people can see theater, I think is incredibly important. And for us, the youth is like you said, that representation element, so that they can see themselves and they can believe that it's something that they can do. It's also a way to expose them to storytelling and the power of storytelling. I know that that's one of the things that got my interest back in reading. I loved reading as a kid, and then I hit middle school and I just did not love reading anymore. In high school, reading, same thing. I sort of fell out of love with it. But in college, when I sort of rediscovered reading by doing plays, because we were always reading these scripts. And I was like, oh, wow, this is so fun, because it activates your imagination when you can hear the voices and feel like you're entering someone's world. And it reminds me of, that's why I loved reading as a kid, because my mom would do all these voices for the stories. So that's what I love about theater. And I think also as we reach into older students with like high school students, we do a program called Our Voices, where we teach the high school students how to write a play. And then a short play, like 5 to 10 pages. And then they direct our actors in bringing that play to life. So it's sort of a switch on, normally theater for young audiences is adults direct and write for youth, and then they perform it. And then this is sort of the flip. So the youth are writing and directing it, and then they're telling the adults where to stand. And say it louder and say it like this. So we're just excited about the different ways that we can sort of fill in gaps of what's not being done or what we haven't seen done yet.
The youth directing the grown-ups, that epitomizes empowerment right there. I love that.
Absolutely. It's fun to watch too.
I'm still so blown away at the fact that you have been able to create something that wasn't available for our generation, and the accessibility of it, bringing theater to where the needs are and exposing kids to artistry that they may not have the access to see otherwise. Just great work. Congratulations on that. That is extraordinary.
I second that.
And even starting this troupe that you started 4 years, you've been together for 4 years, but can you talk about some of the challenges within the last 6 months? I know that we did speak briefly about doing the story time from home, but, just having to adapt to a world without in-person performances. What's that been like?
Yeah, that's been such a challenge because I always say that as a teacher and a theater artist, I am a fan of like no tech. I don't have any technology when I teach. The high school students sometimes make fun of me, like, do you even own a laptop? I'm like, yeah, just don't bring it to the class. And then even with the theater, like one of the things we used to do with when we were touring Frog Prince, we had no text, we had no sound cues, no lights. We had a live musician playing all the transitions and the sound effects. So this was a huge shift for us, but it was also really exciting to think about what we could do differently and what opportunities we had and how we could also highlight some of our other company members who might not be in a show at the time, but what is something that they can do. And maybe they're not in a show because they either their schedule didn't allow it, or they couldn't make the rehearsals, or they have a very different style that maybe didn't line up with the exact show that we were working on at that time. So being able to discover different ways that we could connect with audiences and work with actors has been really exciting. One of the biggest things that came out of the COVID that most of our audience has been really excited about was our monologue writing competition.
Cool.
Yeah, so we had 9 and we decided to do a little bit differently. So instead of the artistic director or the staff picking the winners, we had 9 actors and they each got to pick the winner for themselves, like what monologue would they want to do. And so audiences could submit a monologue for each actor. So like if you wanted to write a monologue, you could submit a monologue for Mauricio. You could also submit a monologue for Carmen. You could submit a monologue for Nate, and then they would choose which one they wanted to do. And so they all recorded their favorite monologues, and we uploaded them to our YouTube. And it was just great to see because it empowered the actors to make the decision so that we had a variety of content being represented that matched a variety of people's interests, which was really exciting because particularly with actors of color, people might jump to one thing. Oh, this is what they want to talk about. This is what they want to talk about right now. This is what they want to talk about, whatnot. And we got such a variety of choices and variety of submissions as well, but also variety of choices that were the final product selected. Some people did want to talk about really topical issues that are going on right now. And some people wanted to talk about having a family game night. And some people wanted to talk about romance, and some people, it was such a variety of what spoke to the actors. And I think that was so exciting for me and something that I hope that we can continue doing that series as well.
And you know what, talking about wanting to talk about current events, something that's happening right now is that there are more and more conversations and calls for the need to elevate the voices of people of color. Now, what's interesting, if you go to Black Ground Theater's website, there's a bit of text I want to ask you about. It basically says that the goal is to fail. Now, I know what you mean by that. The hope is that, to an extent, it won't be necessary. Can you talk about that? Can you talk about the paradigm shift you want to go for and why it's important?
Yes. So originally we started in 2016 with the idea that we would, if a theater company specifically for theater artists of color was truly successful in creating equity for theater artists of color all across Michigan, then we wouldn't be needed in theory, right? Because all the other theater companies would be casting equitably, not only with the actors that they're putting on stage, but with the directors they're hiring, the designers they're hiring, the playwrights they're hiring, even the people who get to become the artistic directors and the new executive directors of the company. That would all be diverse. So in a perfect world, we would become non-existent. As we are putting this mission into progress, we realized that maybe that might take a little bit longer than we thought. We thought that might be maybe like a 5 to 10 year plan. And now that we're going into year 4, we're realizing there are a lot of theater companies doing a much better job of casting actors of color. We're seeing a little bit of growth in that, not as much as we'd want to, but there is definitely growth since 2016. So now we're thinking about how do we encourage more theater companies to hire directors of color, hire playwrights of color, consider people of color being on their actual artistic decision-making staff. So reaching towards that next goal. So we might be around a little bit longer than we had anticipated. And also our actors and our directors and our playwrights and our company members have all expressed that they might not have the desire that we had anticipated to begin working with companies that aren't as diverse. We had thought, oh, well, they would love to get hired by this company that's offering them maybe more money than we could offer them. But for a lot of our company members, they were able to inform us that it's not just about the money. It's a lot of people do it for the passion and for the love, and they like being in spaces where they're not the only person of color, and they have a director of color who understands and can connect with their experience. And the playwright is a person of color who wrote the text that they can connect with. Everyone, the design team, they don't have to explain something to the design team. Even something as simple as like hair, explaining hair, it's very different if particularly for Black women, if a Black woman is able to consult you about how the hair might look versus having a white woman who might not understand that experience. So a lot of our company members have educated us on that they just like being in the space, and there's not maybe a desire right now to leave that space.
Well, the work that you have already done is so special. Hopefully we live in a world where Black and Brown Theater Company can exist forever, but the message also gets across. Hopefully,
that's the goal.
Yes.
This is a library podcast. We have to ask about something, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, because it wouldn't be right, Emilio, if we did not ask you a question about the library. You actually helped us out with this because earlier you spoke of loving to read as a kid.
Yeah.
And your mom reading books to you. So I want to know, perhaps, what was your favorite book, or do you have any fond memories of visiting the library as a youth? Now, I know you said towards, once you became a teenager, you fell off with the reading, but any fond memories visiting the library as a youth?
Yes, I used to go so much, particularly in elementary school. My mom would take me to the library. And what I loved is, it's hard for me to answer what my favorite book is, but if I can give like 3, because
Sure.
I think that's what inspired me as a kid. My mom was always presenting me a variety of books. So I wasn't just exposed to one type of book. So of course I was a big fan of fairy tales, if you can't tell. I think probably my favorite was either Cinderella or Beauty and the Beast as a kid. Also, I love this book called Too Many Tamales by Gary Soto. My mom read that to me as a kid, and I was just so fascinated with the plot point and how they try and get around the fact that they think they've accidentally eaten this ring, and what they do to scramble to hide it. And then you realize they confess to their mom, and then she says, oh, well, I had it the whole time because I wouldn't leave a ring out with a bunch of kids. And so it also, I miss that, like, that books and television and a lot of media used to teach you lessons too.
Yeah.
Great family values of, communicating with your parents, just being honest with them. Your parents are there to love you and raise you and care for you. And it's better to just own up when you make a mistake because they can help you through it. So that was one thing that I learned from Too Many Tamales. And I also, the last book I really loved as a kid was Rainbow Fish, because it wasn't people, it was just animals. And it was like anyone could be in this story, but it also taught kids to love and embrace their differences. And now as a grown up, I love, the last book I read was actually Tyra Banks's autobiography. And she always says, different is better than better. That's what she teaches in her personal branding class. And I think I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I have to credit Rainbow Fish for being there when I was a kid and inspiring me to celebrate my difference. And I think while I did fall off from libraries a little bit in middle school and in high school, I'm so grateful that college I got to experience theater and sort of reinvigorate my love for reading, because then as a college student, I found myself in the library both reading plays to look for that perfect audition monologue. And then I also was, when I would read a monologue and I would find a monologue that I really loved, then there would also be some research required, because I would say, well, I love this monologue about a singer, but I'm not a singer. I can't sing on key. So I have to research what are these phrases that they're talking about? What is accompaniment? What is that? And so you have to look at that. And then you could also, if I was reading a play that took place in a certain time period, maybe if it took place in the 50s, then I could read about what was going on in the 50s. So I could bring that to the character and have a better understanding, either as an actor or director. And then as an adult, when I was living in Hamtramck, I was going to the library all the time because for two reasons. One, because when I was really starving, this was pre-Kresge, internet, I didn't have internet, so I'd go to the library for the internet to research. But then also while I was there, I would access the plays that they had. And then they also had a really great children's book selection. And that's where I started reading some children's book and adapting them into plays as well. So yeah, it's definitely sad to not be able to access a library right now, but I definitely can't wait to go back into a library. And I love that libraries are finding ways to connect with audiences digitally through this time.
Yeah, you are an exceptional library lover. You had us at Rainbow Fish, pretty much. So you kept going. So, before we let you go, is there anything you could say about the performance of Beast of the Town? Any exclusive you could sneak? What we can anticipate?
Yes. So fans of Sasha who've been following her Facebook Live Princess Times will get to see her. She is Beauty in the story. Then also fans will get to see some people who've been following Black and Brown Theater will know Jusino, but then we're also excited to bring in some new people. Alex Morrison is someone who we've never worked with before. He is getting his degree at Wayne State. He's in his senior year. And then Dwight Braxton, who we have worked with once, he actually did the Our Voices project where the teens directed him. So this second project with us. So we're excited to bring in some new faces or some faces we haven't worked with as much. And then also some faces that are familiar and have that variety, because that's our goal. And then I don't know if we were clear about this, but it's all in rhyming verse couplets. Yeah, I think it'll be really fun for people to listen for the rhymes. Some of the rhymes are jammed and a little bit harder to hear. So that'll be a fun challenge for the older kids and the parents watching along. And then the younger kids, I think it'll just be fun to hear the pattern of that rhyme and the rhythm that it creates.
Excellent. And before we go, you guys are on Facebook, right?
Yes, at B&B Theater.
And the website?
blackandbrowntheater.org.
All right. And spell theater, TRE at the end. All right. That's how you're going to find them. Thank you so much, Emilio.
Thank you both. This was awesome.
All right. Emilio Rodriguez, co-founder of Black and Brown Theater, also multi-hyphenate, actor, playwright, director, producer, and exceptional library lover. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. And that was our talk with Emilio Rodriguez, actor and producer and director and playwright and co-founder of the Black and Brown Theater, which is based here in Detroit, blackandbrowntheater.org. Spell theater the sort of old English way with an R-E on the end when you go to search for them, but the link will also be in our show notes. This is A Little Too Quiet, the Ferndale Library podcast, brought to you by the Friends of the Ferndale Library. The music you're listening to here on the outro and the intro is by local musician John Duffy. My name's Jeff Milo, and I was joined by Jasmine Parker, Youth Services Librarian here at the Ferndale Library. It's a library podcast. We started a podcast because we thought it was a little too quiet.